Are you religious at all?
I would say I generally agree with the teachings of Christianity, but I'm not religious. Like, I agree with.
Do you believe in a higher power?
And like turn the other cheek and love the neighbor as thyself and that kind of thing. I think those are good principles.
The teachings of
Yeah, I think good principles.
But do you believe in like a God or like a higher power?
Well, something created the universe, or the universe is here. How did it come to be? You could say whatever caused the universe to come to be is God, or gods, depending on your view. I don't know. I think as a philosophy that I think makes sense is to go out there and to expand consciousness so that we're better able to answer the questions of like, what is the meaning of life? What is the nature of the universe? What are even the right questions to ask? And if we can expand consciousness, more humans and more digital intelligence, then our opportunity to understand the meaning of life is that much greater. And so I would I have the philosophy of curiosity to understand the nature of reality.
So you've never practiced any religions?
No, I was I was sent to weirdly a Hebrew preschool. I'm not Jewish, but my dad sent me there because it was like nearby, and I guess his partners in his engineering firm, they sent their kids there. So I was at Hebrew preschool and then Anglican Sunday school, and so it was like Hava Nagila one day and Jesus Elo the next. But I would say that I've never been particularly religious.
Do you have an answer for what the meaning of life is? What your meaning of life is?
Well, I think currently the thing to do is to expand humanity and consciousness to the point where we're able to answer that question. I don't think we can answer that question yet. We can't answer what's the meaning of life well yet.
I find that so interesting how it's like, we're technically like the most intelligent species on the planet, so to say, but no one on this planet can explain or provide evidence of our existence or how we were created. I find that so, you know what I mean?
It could be very simple.
No one on this planet can say, how were we created? That's why I feel like there has to be some sort of higher power, Like, we're not smart enough to even explain our own existence.
Well, we can say step by step, based on the archaeological evidence, the fossil record, and what we know of physics, how we came to be at this point. But that doesn't explain how the universe came to exist in the first place.
There had to be something at some point. We can't even grasp that, right?
Or is there some higher dimension on which thought and emotion exist? I don't know. How do molecules have consciousness and feelings?
But is there a happy ending here? The Revelations Part 2, the happy ending?
Well, if there's a really good book you think everyone should read, because it would be in the back of the Bible.
Everyone should read this book.
How many people have actually read the Bible?
Fewer than probably say they have, but...
Oh, yeah. I mean...
Do you have
at one point, I when I was a kid, I had this existential crisis, and I was trying to figure out what's the meaning of life. And I was like, oh, it all means nothing. It's all... And I read, a whole bunch of religious books, including the Bible, and I'm like, there's a bunch of things in there they didn't teach you in Sunday school. Sodom and Gomorrah, dark. God sure changes his mind from the Old Testament to the New Testament. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty vengeful in the Old Testament. What was the question?
You get to pick a book to add to the Bible.
Yeah. A book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay. Yeah, good pick.
It's a great book.
Yeah, great book.
And accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior.
On the show.
Personal Lord and Savior. It's a quick prayer.
I mean, let's just say, I agree with the principles that Jesus advocated. There's great wisdom in the teachings of Jesus, and I agree with those teachings. And things like turn the other cheek are very important, because as opposed to an eye for an eye. An eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. So forgiveness, is important, and treating people as you would wish to be treated. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Very important. As Einstein would say, I believe in the God of Spinoza. But hey, if Jesus is saving people, I mean, I wouldn't stand in his way. Like I'll be saved. Why not?
Sweet, we did it.
Yeah.
I think you just said yes.
We got him.
All right.
We got him.
I got him. What to be excited. Sounds good.
You want to get baptized or anything?
I was baptized.
Oh, okay.
Anglican,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's done.
They got me in the water when I was just a baby.
Cool.
This is like,
Second?
yeah. I even had whatever blood and body of Christ, which was kind of weird, if you're a little kid, like you get to give you some weird tasting, biscuit and wine. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I remember thinking that even at age 5. So I was like, and I was definitely like, at Sunday school there, like when they were telling me all the stories, and I was like asking questions, and they really were upset that I was asking questions. And I was like, how Jesus fed the crowd with 5 loaves of bread and 3 fish, and I'm like, how big was the crowd? And where did the fish and bread come from? From his cloak or something? Because I was reading books, and I was like, is this did they materialize? Did it come out I don't know. Where did it come from? How did it? Would you take a bite of the bread and would the bread would just come back to being a full bread?
Yeah, you look away and it's kind of pops back out.
They left out the details.
Where
did the universe come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying I know all the answers here. I'm just, it's just and Jesus was obviously very pro alcohol, because one of his miracles was turning water into wine.
Yeah,
and that was they were having a party. They ran out of wine, and they're like, let's keep this bender going.
good stuff.
Who can solve this problem?
We're out of White Claws.
Friggin' store's closed. Jesus is like, I gotcha. Okay, water, now wine. And they're party on. So,
Accurate.
pro partying with alcohol is literally one of the miracles.
Bible story time with Elon Musk.
You are the, it's you're the savior. You kept the party going with lots of wine. That's great. I would say I generally agree with the teachings of Christianity, but I'm not religious. I agree with.
Do you believe in a
turn the
higher
other cheek
power?
and turn the other cheek and love thy neighbor as thyself and that kind of thing. I think those are good
The
principles.
teachings of
Yeah, I think good principles.
But do you believe in a god or a higher power?
Well, something created the universe, or the universe is, here. How did it come to be? You could say whatever caused the universe to come to be is God, or gods, depending on your view. I don't know. I think as a philosophy that I think makes sense is to go out there and to expand consciousness so that we're better able to answer the questions of what is the meaning of life, what is the nature of the universe, what are even the right questions to ask. And if we can expand consciousness, more humans and more digital intelligence, then our opportunity to understand the meaning of life is that much greater.
Deep.
And so I would call, I have the philosophy of curiosity to understand the nature of reality.
So you've never practiced any religions?
So the reason is that when I was a teenager, I had an existential crisis to try to figure out what's the meaning of life. It doesn't seem to be any meaning. For me, at least, the religious texts, and I read all of them that I get my hands on, did not seem convincing. So then I'm like, okay. Then I started reading the philosophers. Be careful of reading German philosophers as a teenager. It's definitely not going to help with your depression. So reading Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, I'm like, as an adult, it's much more manageable. But as a kid, you're like, whoa. So then I was like, man, I'm just struggling to find meaning in life here. And then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and basically what Douglas Adams was saying is that we don't really know what the right questions are to ask. The question is not what's the meaning of life.
in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Earth, it turns out, is a big computer. And its goal is to answer the question, what's the meaning of life? And Earth comes up with the answer 42. This is where the 42 number comes from. And 420 is just 10 times 42. Yeah. In that book, which is really sort of a book about, it's an existential philosophy book disguised as humor.
Do you have a spiritual life?
Well, it sort of depends on what spiritual means. I
So-
mean, maybe there's some dimension where thoughts exist or something. Because I don't, what is a thought? And what is a, even, is it? I mean, I'm not sure what thoughts are. Whether there's some manifestation of thought in a way that is different from the physical dimensions we're aware of. And there's certainly things that we don't understand about the universe. But I'm less convinced that there's, say, some super consciousness watching over our every movement and kind of evaluating it against some criteria, and deciding whether we're going to go to one place or another when we die. I think that's unlikely.
I think that's very unlikely,
Right.
too. I personally do believe in God, but I don't define God in that way. I would define God as closer to being like science,
Right.
or the energy, the laws that propel science, because science really quantifies. So what is it quantifying?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it does beg the question, if there is some superconsciousness, where did the superconsciousness come from? So I think the most likely explanation is that complexity evolved from simplicity.
Okay, what do you worship?
Well, I don't really worship anything, but I do devote myself to the advancement of humanity using technology.
Do you pray?
I don't. I didn't even pray when I almost died of malaria.
Wow, that's really not praying.
Right.
So you put your money where your bug spray was.
I had this existential crisis when I was a kid, and tried to figure out what's it all about. And none of the books I read seemed to actually have a good answer. So I read all the religious texts, and I read a bunch of philosophy books, and they're all quite depressing, particularly the Germans. Actually, when I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I thought, okay, this is a pretty good one. Just to sort of try to gain greater enlightenment over time. That seems like a good goal. Because we don't really know what the meaning of life is, or even really what the right questions are to ask. But if we can improve our understanding of the universe, then eventually we can figure out what the right question to ask is. If it's not meaning of life, it's something.